the show Accountability Conversations. Here we will profile young women that are human rights defenders and are doing very well in their different sectors. Today we have one such woman. I know most of you most probably know her, or heard, or have at least heard about her or read about her, since she's always in the newspapers. Here with us today is Tariro Gurure. Tariro, welcome.
Thank you, Onika. Thank you for having me.
Please introduce yourself to the people out there that are unfortunate enough not to know you.
My name is Tariro Gurure Takundwa, and I am a young human rights defender, specifically for women and for people with disabilities. And also, just to be specific, I am for women with disabilities. I pride myself in, one, being a young person, being a woman, and also being a woman with a disability. I'm very proud of that.
So why do you think that there is need to specify to say, I'm a woman, but I'm also a woman with a disability, and especially with your work to say that I do advocate for women, but I also do advocate for women with a disability?
Okay, it's really okay to specify. Maybe let me just say that all human rights must be respected. But in all human rights being respected, we need to know that when we speak for other rights, so I then choose which rights I need to speak for according to how I feel, how I want them to be known. And when I speak truth to power, I need to be sort of aligned to that. So I am with a disability. This is my day-to-day life. So when I meet inaccessibility in the day-to-day life, so for me it's really about my day-to-day life. And when I speak about disability, I live it. I am with a disability, so I specify with that. And I really love to see a total and just so it's specifically, so you'd also see that in human rights. You see that there are people that advocate for children's rights. You see that there are people that advocate for LGBTQI rights. There are people that advocate for just women rights. There are people that advocate for men's rights as well, and even for boy children's rights. And then there's also people that advocate for persons with disability rights. All these are human rights. But you know, in a house, there's whether it's a woman or it's a man. There are people that have been raised by single mothers, and we call that the head of the family. But when the head of the family has its branches, that's the same. So the head is the human rights, but its branches, these are these specific groups that we all then represent.
You know, what you just said reminds me of something that Chimamanda Ngozi said. When she said that it's very important to name a problem if you want to address it. So the problem is that persons with disabilities are getting discriminated against. There is lack of inclusion, and so you as a disability rights activist will, you know, get to try and address some of those challenges. So Tari, you've really been very vocal, especially with regards to how you've always advocated for women's rights, for the rights of women with disabilities as well. What would you say have been your challenges from the time you began your journey up until now?
I think the challenge would be the idea of us trying to force the policymakers for inclusion, because for us inclusion is not a privilege, by the way. For us, inclusion is independent. So if I say I need to have a ramp, I want to be able to leave home and come by myself at your place of engagement without asking someone to say, or can you just help me up these 2 stairs? So you see, when we're advocating for inclusion or accessibility, it's our independence that we are for, not for privilege. So you see, there's a question that was asked, Kuti, are you fighting for freedom, or are you fighting for privilege? You know, yes, there are people that then fight for privilege, that when they're at a point of privilege, they forget the struggle. For us, it's about the freedom of movement and accessibility and being able to sit at the table without being discriminated because of my disability, or because of just being a woman or being a young person on top of that matter.
Yeah. Yeah, I really love how you bring out the aspect of being a young person, because that also brings out its own challenges as well. So we do happen to be in election season, and with the history of Zimbabwe, especially with the electoral season, we find that there's so much violence, there's so much misinformation, there's so much even cyberbullying that happens online, especially particularly against human rights defenders. We've seen thousands of them getting arrested in the past. We've seen some of them really being killed. So what would you then say are some of the ways that young women who are human rights defenders like yourself can keep themselves safe throughout this period?
I think the idea is what do you define as safe as a human rights activist? Do you regard your safety online? Do you regard your safety physically, or things like that? I think we need to define this, or we need to say this, Unika. Human rights activists should not fold on principles because there is a certain thing that's happening in an area. They need to continue to speak truth to power. But because of the context of our country, because of the context of the African context, we're on the wrong side of the law, without you even realizing it. Self-censor yourself online. Sometimes there are people that are intentionally there to frustrate you so that you say things that are not there. Remember, we now have the patriotic bill that is there. So you might be cornered into saying things that can get you a conviction. Try to just simplify your advocacy, your activism, but also just be safe of your surroundings. Be sure that you are with people that you trust, and people that call for your community unity. By the way, if you have your community backing, you know that you are a safe person. You can be in a community where you're safe, whether you have differences in political alignment, but if you respect each other as a community, you know that you're in a safe place and a safe home.
So Tari, looking at the kind of advocacy that you do, women's rights and for as a disability rights activist, what would you say are some of the policies that you'd like to see that would really make a great difference in the kind of work that you do, but also in the lives of the groups that you represent?
I think policy inclusion starts from the Constitution. And we need to look at the systematic ways that have sort of affected us as persons with disabilities from the Constitution, because you then go on the clause that speaks on disability, and then it then speaks on we will do such things only when resources permit. So this means that resources have not been permitting since we attained independence in 1980. This is now 2023, born into the system while I was still able-bodied until I got my disability. So do you see where you then start to realize, no, there's something wrong with our system. How can you not put inclusion policies as a matter of urgency in the Constitution? And who is debating our issues, by the way? You spoke of elections. There is lack of representation within the council, within the lower house, yes, the parliament, and as well as the Senate. We only have 2 senates, the whole country, and in the parliament I think we have one person with a disability, and then in the council, Dololo, we don't have a person with a disability. So I am hoping that while we go into the 2023 elections, come 23 November, actually we are going into the nomination court. We need to see people with disabilities being nominated countrywide. We want to see people with disabilities being part of the candidates as we go and vote, not as a matter of merit, but as a matter of being able to deliver on the policies and the voices of everyone that they represent. Another policy that I think is important to note would be inclusion itself. Just inclusion, societal inclusion, economical inclusion, the things that we think don't matter to us, these are the things that make us feel alive as persons with disabilities. So as a human rights defender, or as a women rights defender, women need to feel at ease, need to feel safe. This is the least of what we advocate for.
So Tari, looking at the policy environment, one of the ways in which particularly the government of Zimbabwe has tried to include women in politics is by the use of the quota system. Do you think that mechanism has worked? One. Two, looking at the quota system in itself, do you think that such an environment, and such a system would work if we were to take the quota system and put it for persons with disability and say that we want a certain percentage of people with disabilities in our parliament and in our council?
I think the quota system, for me personally, I am on record saying I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't want it because it doesn't give us empowerment, because I think it's a patriarchal system that was set as an agenda to say, okay, Tagarapasi, and there are women that say they want to be leaders. But how can we make them be there? All right, 66. Well, some people 66. They come there. There's the whipping system that whips them from saying anything against. Remember, I want to give a perfect and practical example of what the whipping system can do. Procurement of sanitary ware that happened in the government. Yet those sanitary ware pads that were meant to came as panty liners.
Yes.
No one raised a concern, even the PR guys. No one raised, but this affects women. This affects girls. There's period poverty. There's people that are desperate in need of sanitary ware. But because you can't raise negative things in parliament against the party that is giving you your allowances, that is giving you the cars, that is giving you hotel privilege, they will recall you. Because the recalling system is there, and it will work if ever you vote against the party that has given you the PR seat. So for me, it would never work to say, all right, let's have from the 60 seats, let's have 10 seats be for people with disability. They might not articulate our issues right, because they fear victimization, they fear being recalled, they fear being chucked out of parliament when they debate real and practical issues.
Those are very important sentiments that you have, and I really share the same sentiments with you, particularly with the quota system and the way that it's really been done or carried out in Zimbabwe. So we're looking at the fact that we are in an election year, we are in an election season, and what we've seen is that we haven't seen enough women being represented, we haven't seen enough people with disabilities being represented in the council or in parliament, and we say that as a nation we want to get there. We want to be in a position whereby we have an equal representation of every class, every gender, every person that can be represented in the parliament, in the council.
Sure.